Welcome back to the 99, where we are focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I am your host, Patrick Marlette, and today we'll be discussing the definitive Neheb Dreadhorde champion. That's right, I said it. I'm a huge fan of Neheb Dreadhorde champion. I have been since he was released, and I absolutely love this list. I do believe firmly that Neheb is one of the best mono-red commanders made available in cEDH. However, he does have a lot of weaknesses and a lot of strengths that we're going to be going over today. This is a update to the previous primers I made. This is what I believe the definitive list for this commander. If you want to be able to accelerate your game with this commander and play most efficiently, this is the way to do it. And of course, I'll go over all the newest updates and the newest combo lines in this video today. But before we roll into the video, of course, if you want to follow along with this deck list, you can do so by following the link down in the description. And of course, while you're down there, you might notice there's a Twitter, Instagram, and Discord. So if you want to discuss all things MTG related, you can do so with me and the rest of the 99 crew there. I'm going to start this video as if we've never seen Neheb Dreadhorde champion before, and I'll do so by reading off what he does. So he's a 2 generic, 2 red, legendary creature, zombie, minotaur, warrior. He's a 5/4 body with trample. Ooh, for 4, that's great. And he has a triggered ability. This is the most important part. Whenever Neheb Dreadhorde champion deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, relevant, you may discard any number of cards. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until the end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So, strengths. He's a 5/4 for 4. That's really impressive, and in most cEDH metas, there is going to be at least one opponent without any real relevant blockers. They may have a few dorks, a Dark Confidant, a Deathrite Shaman. We would love for them to block with those, but he will get through and do damage. Also, he hits planeswalkers. So I've been seeing a lot more planeswalkers recently. You can still get the triggered ability when you smack that planeswalker, which is great. Mind you, the trample damage isn't going to go through to your opponent. It's only going to hit that planeswalker until all of their loyalty counters are removed. So, don't go wasting a double strike effect to really get through on that planeswalker if you're also hoping to damage out your opponent. He does have a few weaknesses though. Unfortunately, he's not hasty. We do have ways to give Neheb haste, but it's going to amount to you playing a mid-range game. I've shifted strategies since recently. I've found that an early game Neheb really just pulls all of the removal from my opponents. For some reason, they get very scared when he hits the field, and are, reasonably so. I can understand why they wouldn't want me looting through my deck, making everyone wheel, and destroying stuff constantly. That makes sense. We want to drop Neheb when we have a way to enable haste. Now, there are a few ways to do so in the list. I'll encourage you to look over those. That's actually not what we're going to discuss today. Previously, in my earlier primers, we noted a few different win cons. Currently, there are 2 of those win conditions listed, but there are 2 more added to the list. And these I found with the most recent additions to MTG, and of course this deck, by extension, have made it much more efficient and much better in cEDH. Let's start by going over the 2 original win conditions for this list, and then I'll go over the newest ones and of course the new additions that have helped lead to a more efficient Neheb Dreadhorde champion. Now, with Neheb Dreadhorde champion out, Aggravated Assault, and at least 5 cards in hand, or if there is a double strike effect active, 3 cards in hand minimum, you have infinite combat. So once you commence the attack with Neheb, you'll get that triggered ability active, and depending on your board state, whether Neheb has double strike or not, you'll discard the requisite amount of cards, net the mana from his triggered ability, and pay for the activated cost of our Aggravated Assault to go ahead and damage out the board with commander damage, or should their life be low enough, just strictly damage them out. Never play Aggravated Assault unless you have Neheb on the battlefield. Just don't do that. It's our main win condition for the list. We want to hold that until Neheb is ready to go off. Now, with this in mind, the requisite to go off with Aggravated Assault is 8 mana. You need 3 to play Aggravated Assault, and of course 5 to activate it. And sometimes we might initially start by activating it with our land base and or a ritual we might have in our hand, but for the most part we're trying to do it with the cards in our hand. Otherwise, we don't necessarily go infinite, because we do need those cards discarded off Neheb every single time to get the mana to pay for this effect. So it's a very simple 2-card combo with Neheb. It works great in this list with all of the wheels we utilize, so you should have a flush hand to be able to do this. One of the tricks I like best is using Sarkhan's Triumph to find our Runehorn Hellkite on an earlier turn. And mind you, Sarkhan's Triumph is at instant speed, but playing that at the end of our opponent's turn, getting Runehorn Hellkite and burying it with Neheb is a great way to set ourselves up with a flush hand and get ready to go off with Aggravated Assault. Hopefully we gambled into it and or we looted into it, or whatever the case, after the Runehorn Hellkite will be good with a flush hand of 7 to go through our list and hopefully net our plan A win. However, what if plan A fails or we have a better win con made available to us? This is a classic win condition in mono red. It's Dualcaster Mage and Heat Shimmer. You can also do this with Twin Flame, and earlier versions of this very primer use Twin Flame, but in a lot of instances I found I never had the creature able to target with Twin Flame to allow me to use the Dualcaster loop. So Heat Shimmer allows us to target any creature. It's a much better card to utilize here. But essentially, once you target a creature with Heat Shimmer, we'll be able to flash out Dualcaster Mage, and when he ETBs, he'll copy Heat Shimmer, targeting himself, and this is going to allow us a loop to create infinite tokens with haste. To end the loop, all you need to do is target the last copy of Heat Shimmer at a different creature, whatever the initial creature was. So let's just say we steal our opponent's commander, we'll just use Heat Shimmer the last time on that commander, have infinite hasty wizards and whatever that commander was, and swing. So what if we have Dualcaster Mage in hand, but our Heat Shimmer is in our graveyard? Perhaps we wielded or we looted it away with Neheb on a previous turn. Well, so long as our opponents don't have a way to disallow us to target and or play cards from our graveyard, we have 4 ways to retrieve Heat Shimmer from our grave and or simply cast it from there. And we can do so via cards that activate a flashback cost, such as Past in Flames and or Recoup. We can actually cast it straight out of our grave with Finale of Promise and then cast Dualcaster Mage, or use Shreds of Sanity to recover it and place it back in our hand. So if we loot or wheel into a Dualcaster Mage, well, guess what, Neheb? It's been fun, but we use Boseiju for a reason. Go ahead and cast your Heat Shimmer, make it uncounterable, and hopefully have a redirect and or a counter blue spell. It's gonna be the blue player to make sure that this combo line goes off. Again, it's an excellent classic 2-card combo in mono red. The next combo I want to talk about that is new to this primer but not new to the game of Magic utilizes a little item called Sword of Feast and Famine. And if you don't know what this card does, it's an equipment that costs you 3 mana. It's the most important part. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and green. So that's actually really excellent news, because there's a lot of black kill spells that will take out a Neheb and or any of our creatures. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, excellent, and you untap all the lands you control. Well, guess what? With any creature, Sword of Feast and Famine, and Aggravated Assault, at least 5 minimum lands, and or if you have a land that taps for 2 generic, maybe 4, you have infinite combat. Again, this is an old combo, but at the time I created Neheb, there wasn't a very efficient way to get this to go off. Well, now we've included Goblin Welder and a recent addition, Goblin Engineer, to the list. Now, Goblin Engineer acts as an entomb for our sword, and I'll go ahead and read him off now. We discussed him in our previous set review for Modern Horizons, but lovely new addition, excellent for Neheb. I'm so glad it came about because we have a 1 generic, 1 red creature Goblin Artificer. He's a 1/2 body, so he's not too squishy. When he enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact and put it into your graveyard, shuffle your library. And if you used Hall of the Bandit Lord on him, you can go ahead and do this next activated ability. It's red, tap, sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact card with a converted mana cost of 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, look at that. We can set up our sword combo in one fell swoop and hopefully damage out the board. If not this guy, then maybe Captain Lannery or someone else that we'll also have on the field. But what's lovely about this combo is it doesn't rely on Neheb. At this point, if you're trying to rely on the secondary line, it's likely that Neheb has been killed and or exiled too many times and he costs entirely too much to play. So if such is the case, it's good to go into the secondary line of play and use this with our Aggravated Assault instead. But that's old news. We all knew about the Sword of Feast and Famine combo. However, there is a line of play that you might not be too familiar with on an equipment that is not really seen in cEDH, and that item is called Spellbinder. This is going to be our next win condition for the list, our fourth for the list. Spellbinder is a 3 CMC artifact equipment, obviously. It has imprint. When Spellbinder comes into play, you may remove an instant card in your hand from the game. Well, we got a few options in that regard. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may copy the imprinted instant card and play the copy without paying its mana cost. Now, this is 4 to equip, so the setup is slightly intensive, but there are 3 ways to win out over a board with the Spellbinder. Now, I'm going to go over all 3 of them, as well as a noteworthy inclusion, something that you should be looking for if you have the Spellbinder in hand. However, I want you to know that the third win con for the Spellbinder strategy may or may not stay in the list, because it utilizes a card called Sundial of the Infinite that is a niche strategy in this list. It's a good way to remove any spells or abilities that are on the stack and save our Neheb from getting destroyed. However, it's got to be tested just a little bit more. But let's go ahead and read off our first play line with the Spellbinder. So, should you have any creature, let's just say Captain Lannery, Spellbinder, and you've Spellbound Savage Beating, you have infinite combats. How does this work? Well, so long as this creature of yours is dealing combat damage to your opponent, you are able to cast the spell that is on the staff. And if that spell is Savage Beating, it's a modal spell that allows us to take an additional combat after this combat phase. So what we'll do is swing at the player who's open and keep on recasting Savage Beating. Now, ideally, we'll have Pyroclasmed or cleared the board of any opponents that might be able to block, because of course we need to hit with Spellbinder. Now, obviously, Spellbinder and Neheb would be the best creature to have it equipped to, because we'll have that trample going on. But we do have ways to give our creatures trample as well. If you have something like Tamir Battle Rage, that will give your creature trample, should you have something with 4 damage on the board. Let's just be honest, we really want this on Neheb. However, it is an alternative way to win that doesn't utilize Neheb necessarily. The next combo line is actually very similar to Sword of Feast and Famine Aggravated Assault, except it uses a little ritual called Seething Song. So, should you have any creature on deck, and we've spellbound Seething Song and have Aggravated Assault out, we are generating 5 mana every time we do damage to a player. And this will allow us to cast Seething Song and use Aggravated Assault's ability. Again, lending to infinite combats. Now, let me just start by saying, all of these things sound dandy. They are difficult to assemble, and we work with what we can get in mono red. I will state, Spellbinder has worked for me in the past glowingly, so it's not as if it's difficult to do. The thing is, you can Goblin Engineer the Spellbinder and switch it out whenever you have that instant in hand that's going to net you the elusive win. Okay, so you don't need to early game Spellbinder and stick the item to it and just hope it stays on the field, you know, ready for you to go ahead and do the infinite combat or do the magical thing. You're most likely going to switch this back into the field. It'll be looted with Neheb into your graveyard. You're going to switch it onto the field with Goblin Welder and or Engineer in most cases where this goes off, because 4 to equip is already enough. The 2 generic to cast, we're going to try to avoid, or rather 3 generic to cast, we're going to try to avoid. Lastly, here is the third win condition I wanted to discuss, and I have not accomplished this yet. I will state that Sundial has done a lot of work on its own. However, any creature, along with a spellbound Final Fortune and Sundial of the Infinite, gives us infinite turns. Well, how does this work, you ask? Well, when we do that combat damage and cast Final Fortune, we just need to make sure we might not even have Sundial of the Infinite out when we do this, and would be crazy not to at least have it in our hand. But we're going to go ahead, take an extra turn, and if you have Sundial of the Infinite, as that delayed trigger hits the stack, we are going to activate Sundial of the Infinite, take it off the stack, and if we attacked with that same creature, whomever had the spellbound Final Fortune equipped, we're going to get continuous extra turns. So that means extra draws, extra potential to go off. So maybe, just maybe, one of your opponents, he isn't being attacked by you, so he doesn't care that you're doing this. He's going to let you go off on someone else, eliminate one threat, and maybe he'll try to deal with you then. Well, the benefit of having extra turns is that you have all those extra draws. So again, this is one that somewhat exists in Magic Christmas Timeland, but I have yet to accomplish it, but it is a known combo for the Spellbinder. Personally, I think Sundial Infinite can and probably should be either Blood Mist and or Expedition Map, which we can actually just talk about now. It's my firm belief that Double Strike is the core to this list. It's absolutely essential to this list. Moreover, any other draw, effect, or mechanic in this particular list, you want to do Double Strike, because that's going to allow us those additional Neheb triggers. But Blood Mist is a way to have recurable Double Strike for any of your creatures, and with additional combats, you can target new creatures with Blood Mist. It's 3 generic, 1 red enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains Double Strike until the end of turn. So you obviously don't need to keep targeting Neheb after the first time. And or Expedition Map. This one's fairly obvious if you've never seen it before. It's one of the better artifact tutors in my book. It's 1 generic, it's 2 generic to tap. You sacrifice Expedition Map and you search your library for a land card, reveal it and put it into your hand. Then you shuffle your library. More oftentimes than not, it's going to grab us our Hanwar Garrison and or rather battlements, Hanwar Battlements and or Hall of the Bandit Lord, or if you're playing against a blue player, you're going to grab Homeward Path. And sometimes you'll grab Cavern of Souls. More oftentimes than not, people let Neheb resolve. Him being cast isn't an issue. Him attacking is an issue. And there's more ways, or at least better ways, to remove him from the field than a counterspell. Cavern of Souls is generally going to be for a warrior or minotaur. I mean, we have a warrior, I believe, in this list, but Cavern of Souls is really just a safety precaution. If anything, if we have, our boots on the field that are going to enable us to have haste, then we would want Cavern of Souls. But at any rate, I'm going off course here. There's one more Spellbinder combo I want to discuss with you. I say combo, but with Neheb Dreadhorde Champion and a Spellbound Uncaged Fury, and really any creature, you'll get additional and extra combats. You'll get additional damage, defense, and Double Strike on the spot. So it's going to help us, because some games, maybe it's going slow or it's a slog, and the Spellbound Uncaged Fury is allowed to resolve because no one cares about that. It's going to give us the Double Strike we want. Like I said, Double Strike being key to this list. This is a noteworthy combo because it enables constant Double Strike should the Spellbinder be allowed to remain. Again, there are 2 Spellbind combos that are definitely worthwhile. The Seething Song Spellbound combo, as well as our Savage Beating combo. Honestly, Savage Beating should probably just be reserved for Spellbinder. It is a hard cast at 5 for 1 additional combat. Generally speaking, I like imprinting it onto the Spellbinder more than I do casting it. But what I do want to talk about are some recent additions to this list that have caused question and or have caused no question and are excellent. Lotus Bloom. That's what I'm going to start with. It's a suspend 3, 0 cost artifact. So rather than play this card from your hand, you pay 0 and remove it from the game with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter, so on and so forth. What you get at the end of the day is a Black Lotus. Why I've included it? Well, we are playing more of a mid-range strategy now. And Lotus Bloom allows us to get a very effective turn 3 if it was played on turn 1. And or late game, it's an artifact in our graveyard we can switch out with our Goblin Engineer and Goblin Welder. Again, we're doing a lot with a little can be tricky in red, so we're playing to its strengths. There's plenty of effects that I'm not even using that allow us to switch out artifacts from the field and our graveyard, and Lotus Bloom is an excellent one to switch in and out of the battlefield, specifically because it's a Black Lotus when you do so. And this is going to help us recast Neheb on subsequent turns and or just cast big spells. And we've got a lot of them. You might notice our curve is kind of ridiculous on this list because we do have some spells that are in the 4 to 5 to 6 region. And we need things like Lotus Bloom to help those go off. More recently, I've added Hope of Jirapur, and this is another artifact we can switch in and out of our grave. What's nice about it is it's 1 generic, legendary artifact creature Thopter. You could even make it a commander. It's a 1/1 flying, so it's going to get through, at least to someone. Sacrifice Hope of Jirapur. Until your next turn, target player who was dealt combat damage by Hope of Dreadhorde this turn can't cast non-creature spells. Well, if this Neheb was Boros, we'd have access to a lot of silence effects, but he's not, so this is the best we get. However, it is more than enough. Should you have a way to enable haste on this, such as Hall of the Bandit Lord, you can throw this guy down and make him part of the attack with Neheb. Silence the opponent that you know is going to have some sort of say-so in your combat. The best bit of news with Hope of Dreadhorde is it forces action on your opponent's part, because if they suspect you can go for a win, and I don't know why, you're really rolling the dice every time you attack, but if they suspect you can go for a win, of course they're going to interact with the fact that they can't cast spells after the matter. So Hope of Dreadhorde is a good way to force your opponent's hand, but not only that, should they elect to not do anything, you can just shut them down and deal with 2 opponents, and that makes life so much easier. More recently, we've added Dockside Extortionist. Wow, this guy's ridiculous. Dockside Extortionist. Woo! Golden Boy for red. Ernesto and I just talked about this card, but it's generic red creature goblin pirate. Love that he's a pirate. 1/2. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. I don't need to tell you why this is good. If you run a list that uses red, you should probably use this. This is one of those cards. This is just one of those cards that feels like an auto-include. Why? Well, you get artifacts to switch out with your Engineer and Welder. You also get Ramp to be able to play Neheb more efficiently. And you get a body. You get a body that can swing with a sword and use Aggravated Assault. That's pretty crazy. But, I mean, he's a 3/4 when he does it, at least. Dockside Extortionist, a must include in Neheb if you're new to this primer. That's why he's there. If you followed the old primer, yes, slam dunk. We got a new one, guys. Now, before we close out this video, I want to discuss some cards I'm frequently asked about, why they aren't in the list, why they were removed from the list. And there's good reason. I play in a lot of different metas. Some are much quicker than others, some are much slower than others. Some are just powered metas, some are definitely cEDH. But no matter the case, we're always playing Neheb mid-range. So a lot of these cards feel like they would lend to a mid-range game. However, they're never going to be target number 1 from Goblin Engineer. So most notably, one of the cards I'm talking about is Mask of Memory. Mask of Memory is an artifact that allows us to loot 2 cards when we hit an opponent and discard 1. It's too generic, 1 to equip, it's just okay. Now, there's never been a moment where I was itching to get Mask of Memory onto the field and or have it equipped to Neheb, because I'll tell you what, more oftentimes than not, even if I'm not comboing with it, I would rather have Sword of Feast and Famine on the battlefield and or our Swiftfoot boots, because being able to give us 1 layer of protection from our opponents with something like Swiftfoot boots, which makes us hexproof and have haste, is usually far superior to a Mask of Memory play. Again, we're playing more mid-range, so we're mostly setting up for subsequent attacks. So having Mask of Memory out early into a Neheb play is great, but again, between Swiftfoot boots and your Sword of Feast and Famine, and in some regards Spellbinder, it's a lesser equipment for the deck, and that's why it's been excluded from the list. Next card I want to talk about, and I've been asked about it altogether too many times. I don't know if people are trolling me at this point or not. Alhamret's Archive. It's 5 generic, legendary artifact, legendary. If you would gain life, gain twice, that's never going to happen. If you would draw a card, except for the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So you're fueling those Notion Thieves. You're just enabling the Sphinxes of the world. It's okay. Again, we're playing mid-range, so there's plenty of time to cast a 5 CMC spell. But when we play Neheb, we're purposefully missing land drops to keep a flush hand, right? Or at least that's what I do. Maybe I'm crazy, but it wins games that way, because we want more cards to remove from our hand to allow us to loot from more. This can maybe alleviate some of that, because you get to play more of your lands to play into this, and then maybe with the 2 or 3 cards you have left when Neheb is out, you can loot for that much more. If your opponents allow you to set up with this, they're mad. Secondly, just because we're playing a mid-range game doesn't mean everyone else is. The issue with this is when I tap out to play Archive, because in all likelihood you're going to tap out to play Archive, you're not going to be able to interact with the rest of the board, and I hate that. I hate spells that cost a lot and do nothing on arrival because you are saying to the rest of the board you have no plays. That's exactly what you're broadcasting. You're like, I'm going to wait to try to win on my next turn, and they're like, okay, well, I see he's going to try to win on his next turn. Also, he's letting me win right now. So the Gitrog player, he's just going to go off because he's not expecting you to do anything to him now. I mean, what, your Chaos Warp on his Toad? It wasn't enough to begin with, but this is really broadcasting the fact that you're in mono red and you need every little bit of help that you can get. However, I will highly encourage over this, Blood Mist, or anything that's going to offer you Double Strike instead. I've never used it. I have tested it multiple times. It's not efficient enough, and it's not worthy for the Dreadhorde champion. The last exclude I want to talk about was actually a recent update to the list, and he's been fine. Every time I've cast him, most of the times I've cast this guy, he has been countered. I can't tell you why. But Glinthorn Buccaneer, he's a generic 2 red, creature Minotaur Pirate, hasty, 2/4 body. Whenever you discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer does 1 damage to each opponent. It's great. It is great when you have a fat bag of holding and you just throw that in your hand at the end of the turn and you just smack everyone for 7 damage. It's great. He also has an activated ability that allows you to pay 1 and a red, discard a card to draw a card, so you loot. You can only activate it when he is attacking, however. So he has haste, you're going to be doing it automatically. I think Glinthorn Buccaneer is great, but not in this list precisely. He hasn't proven well. He's oddly taking up the same slot on our curve where Neheb is hoping to land, or at least removing us the resources to get Neheb out, because he's 2 red and 1 generic, and Neheb is 2 generic and 2 red. So we're using a lot of our resources to put this guy down, and oddly enough, he always gets hated on. I genuinely couldn't tell you why. I've removed him in an effort to make the list more efficient with other utilities, but he can just as easily slot back in if you found success with him, and I'm sure you have. It's a great way to disallow the players, the players that are using black, disallow them from life as a resource. So any of their Necro piles are going to be that much smaller. Any of their Adnos piles are going to be that much smaller if you've been consistently looting with Glinthorn Buccaneer on the field. But again, people are threatened by that for some reason. So I have removed it from my list. Let me know if you found success with Glinthorn Buccaneer, Mask of Memory, Alhamrad's Archive, in your list, obviously, how it's slotted into your list, what you're using as opposed to what I might be using. But I've taken these out because they've not only been hated on and or have been inefficient, but they don't lend to the best Neheb Dreadhorde Champion game. So what have I learned from playing Neheb Dreadhorde Champion over these last few months? Well, you certainly don't want to play him out too early. That is, if you don't have an effective wheel in hand. And you certainly don't want to play him if you can't hasten him on the spot. Now, this isn't to say you should keep a starting hand with some sort of haste enabler. No, you should keep a hand that could effectively get you him mid-game, but also holds decent interaction for your opponent. Because what we're going to try to do is set up our board state very passively while people are playing out their turns. And honestly, the games I've won most with Neheb, and I've won a lot of games with him since recently, are the ones where I just waited. And most of the case in cEDH, the person who tries to go off first rarely ever wins. You wait for that person to fail and everyone to have removed all their resources, and then you throw Neheb in. He's going to have his best odds then. He is an aggro list, but that doesn't mean you should be overly aggressive with him because you're going to get shut down. And red does not have a good way to bounce back from that sort of situation. He is our best means of going through the list. It's sort of a double-edged sword because you want him out to hit the cards in your list, but you also don't want to threaten the board too early that they are forced to remove him early. But personally speaking, with the list in its current form, we've had a lot of success with the new combo lines, the new additions. The list is only growing stronger, and I actually hope if there have been game-changing alters to other lists on the channel, of course, I'll come back with a better version of that list for you all so that when you go to make the deck, you feel like you're playing with the best version of it. And you know, these kind of updates only happen through repeated play. and I'm happy to have had all this time with him. You know, things like Epicenter, boy, I blew out a game with Epicenter recently. I had Beseju. It's like, it's just going to happen. But if Neheb is out and you Epicenter, if you guys don't know what that is, it destroys all of the lands, including yours. Sure, people are going to hate you. I mean, if you're trying to win the game, though, that's a good way to do it. But there have been recent additions here that I never would have considered until I've played the list out, and I'm super happy with where Neheb is now. At any rate, guys, I hope this video was useful to you. If you are a loyal Heb enthusiast like myself, feel free to comment in the comment section down below with your list, how you've been playing them, your success with this list perhaps. I'd love to hear all your Neheb-like stories. Lastly, again, join us over on Twitter, Instagram, and Discord to continue the conversation. My name is Patrick Marlette, and happy brewing, babies.